Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I got an email from Daniel Hershey. Subject line, church updates policy for creating or changing unit boundaries, church news. And then Daniel says, hey Jared, this is great news. The Spirit filled my soul as I read these new policies. Enjoy. And then he leaves me with the link for the article. So you may recall that I've been keeping a spreadsheet for whenever there's big changes in the church, and especially changes that seem to be preparing the church for the second coming and for the millennium and for the reception of many people that will want to join the church once Christ comes. And it looks like the next big change. And it provides some pretty solid numbers that I didn't have before. I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. And I don't know. So we're going to go through this. And then we're going to move on to the concept of this being preparation for a large influx of people into the church, primarily at the beginning of the millennium. So before we get into all that, here is the update on the Flood the Earth Challenge. I have not updated it since the last video, but we're at 7,332 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. Please consider joining the challenge if you haven't already. And if you have already, try to at least get to 10. If you don't remember how many you've already shared, you can come to my tracker. It's part of, it's in the same workbook as all my spreadsheets. You see the tabs down here? Just go to #FloodTheEarth. And the link for this is in the description box of every video. There's a link that will bring you here. And then you can go to the very far left, look up your name, and then remind yourself how many you have already shared if you lost track. But good job, everybody. Keep it up. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the article. It's called Church Updates Policy for Creating or Changing Unit Boundaries. The First Presidency notified stake, ward, and other church leaders of the change in a letter November 30th. That was yesterday. Okay. The First Presidency announced new unified standards for the creation and adjustment of ward and stake boundaries in a letter sent to ward, stake, and other priesthood leaders on November 30th. As of January 1st, 2024, the new policy eliminates differences that previously existed between wards and stakes in the United States or Canada and the rest of the countries where the church is organized. Okay? So apparently, and this is something that I didn't know before reading this, there was a different standard for the US and Canada and the rest of the world when it came to the numbers needed to constitute a ward or a stake. And we'll look at those numbers in just a minute. Quote, leaders should use the new minimum requirements outlined in the attached document when considering boundary proposals, the letter states. Among the adjustments outlined in the letter, a new requirement is the measurement of, quote unquote, participating adults and participating youth. These are individuals who pay full or partial tithes, hold current temple recommends, have callings in the church, are new members who are attending sacrament meeting during their first year of membership, or are youth enrolled in seminary. So that's the definition, broadly speaking, of what a participating adult is and a participating youth. All right. The new participation measurement is meant to, quote, assist leaders in identifying members who participate in a meaningful way and to help evaluate the strength of a boundary proposal, the letter states. Okay, so you get that? They are taking into account people that participate in church as they decide ward and stake boundaries. And by the way, I would encourage you, if you're not participating in your ward or your stake, look to do so. Go to church every Sunday. That's part of keeping the Sabbath day holy. And it's always good to have a calling. So maybe consider talking to your bishop. But it's good to participate. Make sure that you have your temple recommend. That's critical. Make sure that you're worthy to have a temple recommend. I would say these are all the things that you want to do among, just keeping all the commandments. But these are things that you want to do to be prepared for the second coming. That's what I would recommend. I think that the church would recommend that too. All right, continuing. Elder D. Todd Christofferson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles posted on social media on Thursday, November 30th, and said one of the reasons the Savior organized his church was to, quote, give us experience in loving others, to learn what being motivated by charity means in practice. There is genius in the organization of local church units based on geography. Okay, I'm going to read that again. And keep this in mind. There is genius in the organization of local church units based on geography. We don't choose a congregation based on who we like or want to be with, he wrote. And then continuing, wards are chosen for us based on a reasonable geographic alignment, and we learn to live with, serve, and love people who might well be different in background, preferences, and opinions. Now, I think that this is really important because I think it's along the same lines, in a sense, of who becomes an apostle, who becomes president of the church. The Lord chooses that. Okay? The Lord is the one who chooses that. It's not, there, like President Nelson has said, there's no politicking to get into a position of authority in the church. And a lot of it is determined once you get into the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, whether you become president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles or whether you become president of the church, largely depends on how long you live. And if the Lord allows you to live to such a point where you are the senior apostle or have the most seniority in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and in that way, the Lord chooses, he like puts those like safeguards in place, and it goes according to his plan. Likewise, when it comes to where we live, I know, and I'm sure you know, that the Lord has a lot to do with that. In the first place, he's the one that determines where you are born. If you're born in the United States, or if you're born in Nigeria or some other place. So he determines your geography in that way. And then as you start to live life, you do have agency in what you do, but the Lord still has a hand in that, especially if you're actively, asking for his guidance in what decisions you should make in your life. So I think we can fall into the tendency, the way that the natural man would think, and look at our wards and stakes and be like, oh, it's meaningless. It's arbitrary. It doesn't matter. This is just like this is a ward and it's all just random. But we as members of the church should know better, that there isn't coincidence, that the Lord places people in our lives. They place you in other people's lives. And when it comes to his church and wards and stakes, he's probably even more concerned with who is with who in what ward and stake rather than just the rest of the world, where people live in towns and places like that. He probably has a lot of focus on his church. Does that make sense? So for all you know, maybe you are in the perfect place because you are uniquely qualified to help somebody else in your ward. Even if they don't like you, maybe in some way you will influence them for the better. Okay. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. All right, continuing. The new ward and stake requirements letter does not direct any immediate changes be made to existing boundaries, but it does indicate that proposals that have already been submitted will be held to the new standards on January 1st, 2024. Okay, there's his Instagram post. The unified requirements used to create a stake will now include the need for each stake to have 2,000 total members in the stake. Stakes in the US and Canada previously needed to have 3,000. Those outside these two countries needed 1,900. Okay, so now it's all the same. Everything's been synchronized across the entire world. And now in the US and Canada, I imagine that in the process of time, there's going to be more stakes than what we have now, because now stakes are smaller. And so you have to take what was, the extra 1,000 and then roll them into another stake. But it would be through the process of time. Like the article said, it's not going to be an immediate change. So I would assume that just it would just naturally in not a haphazard way, things would eventually get to that point, along with just the continued growth of the church and church membership. So there's going to be more stakes in the process of time in the US and Canada, because now it's 2,000 instead of 3,000. And now countries outside the United States, compared to how it was before, they're going to have more, just 100 more in order to qualify as a stake. All right, continuing, stakes will need 150 active, full tithe-paying Melchizedek priesthood holders capable of serving in leadership positions. They will also need a total of 500 participating adults. Okay, so the 2,000 is just the total number. Youth, adults, Melchizedek priesthood, non-participating adults. So the requirements for a stake is 150 active full tithe-paying Melchizedek priesthood holders, 500 participating adults, and 2,000 total members. That is the requirement for a stake. Continuing, the new requirements also mean wards will need 250 members and 20 active full tithe-paying Melchizedek priesthood holders capable of serving in leadership positions. Now, this is another requirement, but this has to do with wards. 20 active full tithe-paying Melchizedek priesthood holders capable of serving in leadership positions. Each will need 100 participating adults as well. Okay, and then here we are at the end of the article. Full text of the first presidency letter on unit boundaries. Dear brothers and sisters, a worldwide uniform standard has been established for creating new units or changing stake and ward boundaries. A new participation measure will be added to the boundary proposal process to assist in evaluating unit strength when boundary updates are being considered. Leaders should use the new minimum requirements outlined in the attached document when considering boundary proposals. General Handbook, Serving in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as well as the boundary proposal system, which can be accessed through the leader and clerk resources, will be updated to reflect these changes in early 2024. Sincerely yours, the first presidency. Okay, so I'm really happy, Daniel, that you sent me this article, because I've been wanting these numbers. I wasn't able to find anything really before this point. I found something that was like talking about like Spanish branches and wards, and so I just kind of used that number in this spreadsheet that I put together. And we're going to talk about this spreadsheet in just a moment. Some of you may recognize this. This is my chronological list of major changes since President Nelson became president of the church, and there have been very many significant changes made to the church since that time. So this is the latest one. I have it at the top. The first presidency announces new unified standards for the creation and adjustment of ward and stake boundaries. I have the references over here in this column on the right. And we're going to get into, you know, the importance of these numbers when it comes to the second coming and specifically the beginning of the millennium. So let me get you up to speed in case you don't know what I'm talking about or if you haven't seen this spreadsheet before. Okay, first, I want to tell a story. It's not really a story, but when I was in the Army, there were a lot of things that scared me. There were a lot of things that scared me. And one of those things was the general understanding, and I guess you could say Army doctrine, that you, no matter your position, no matter your MOS, which is your military occupational specialty, or your job, no matter what your job is, your rank, you were expected to learn and know what everybody else did, understand their job and their duties, because whether you're deployed or whether you're not, it doesn't really matter either way. If something happens, if there's a change in personnel, you might be needed to fill in, to cover down is what they would say, cover down and fill in that vacancy, whatever the reason for the vacancy, because you can't just in the Army, it's not like you can just like go pick somebody up off the street, or you don't have like all these like qualified people. There's all these different requirements just to get into the military in the first place. And so there may be times where there's nobody to fill in that spot. And guess what? Now it's you. And I didn't like that because I was already struggling enough with my job, because I was in a particularly difficult position for my job. The type of unit that I was in, it was pretty high intensity and I couldn't really take much more. But guess what? The day did come. It did. It came for me. And I became the unit, not only the lead supply specialist in the supply room, but no, on top of that, hey, Davies, we need you to be the armorer now. And then after that, guess what? After that, I became the MBC guy, which is nuclear, biological, chemical. Every unit has one. They're the guys that are in charge of the gas masks and the CBRN equipment. CBRN is chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. It's just those people. And there's every unit has equipment that can, that has to do with that kind of stuff. And my unit didn't have a CBRN person. And so guess what? I became that too. Went through just a few weeks of training, and then suddenly I was supposed to give trainings, to people and know everything. And it was really fun. So with that in mind, let's think about the church as we move into the millennium and as there's a big influx of people that suddenly join the church. Because I think that all of us are going to be in that kind of situation. And let me explain why. So the first time I really started thinking about this was when I saw a YouTube video. It's called Brad Wilcox, 12 Tribes of Israel Breakdown, Amazing Talk. Here's the link for it. You can watch it. And what I'm about to quote is from the 38-minute and 3-second mark. Okay. Bradley R. Wilcox, second counselor in the Young Men General Presidency. Okay, look what he says. But when the second coming comes, that's when these tribes are going to give us a totally different organization, a different level of organization that's going to become very important. I mean, right now, we've got to get organized, because when Jesus comes and he says, by the way, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that is what he's going to say. So do you think there's going to be a little interest in the church? Oh, yeah. We will be ready. Will we be ready to have 2 billion people join the church in one day? Will we have enough stake presidents? Will we have enough bishops? Will we have enough young women presidents? Will we have enough full-time missionaries? Will we have enough full tithe payers? We got to get with it. We got to get organized so that when we have that huge influx into the church, it doesn't swamp us. We've got leaders all over the world, who can handle that. So, Elder Darling, you're not going to Guatemala to baptize everybody. Now, that's what your mission president might say, and that's certainly what your zone leader is going to say. But really, you're there just to get things organized, bring people into the church, help them become leaders. Help people back into the church and help them become leaders. Help youth become leaders. Help other missionaries become leaders. You've got to strengthen this organization so when Jesus comes, that's when we're going to baptize everybody. And we've got to be ready for that. And we've talked about that before. Joseph, I'm not going to read the quotes right now, but Joseph Fielding Smith said that that's going to be our greatest time of need for missionaries is at the beginning of the millennium. The gospel is going to go forward in ways that it hasn't before, to places it hasn't before. And so it's probably going to be, no matter how prepared we try and be, it's probably going to be pretty intense when it does happen. And so what he's saying here is, yeah, we're going out trying to baptize people, but everything before the second coming is the entire restoration in this dispensation. It's meant to prepare for the second coming and prepare for that time when the gospel goes literally all over the world. And in the process of time, everyone will be converted. Either the older generations who hold on to their beliefs will pass away. And at the same time, more and more people will join the church. And then eventually the entire world will be members of the church. But the first part of the millennium is going to be kind of intense. So we've got to become leaders or be prepared to know what to do. You know, do you ever look at the bishop, the elders quorum president, the relief society president, and these different leadership positions, and do you try and, understand what they do, just in case you're tapped to fill in that position? Look what happened, and I just covered this in my 144,000 playlist about the 144,000. And there is precedent for this. There is precedent for this. I'm going to read this. This is called Early Quorums of the 70s by Susan Easton Black. This is on BYU's website. Okay. Quote, "Brethren, I've seen those men who died of the cholera in our camp," said Joseph Smith to Brigham Young and his brother Joseph. "And the Lord knows, if I get a mansion as bright as theirs, I ask no more." The prophet then wept for a time, was unable to continue. After gaining composure, he told Brigham that he would be one of the 12 appointed to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to the nations of the world. Turning to 37-year-old Joseph Young, the prophet said, "Brother Joseph, the Lord has made you president of the 70s." End quote. Brigham's elder brother was startled by the prophetic announcement. He knew something of Moses and the 70 elders of Israel and of Jesus appointing other 70, but it had never occurred to him that men would be called to the 70s in the dispensation of the fullness of times. Yet Joseph Young and 3,129 other men were ordained 70s during the early years of the church. Okay, skipping down. The responsibility that Joseph rolled onto the shoulders of the newly called 70s was surprising, if not startling, to men relatively young in age and in understanding of the gospel. Comprehending Joseph's vision of equality with the 12 in the 7 times 70 was foreign to men who knew little of the restoration and even less of the world that awaited their message. They were economically poor, lacking in formal education, and devoid of experience with cultures and nations. Most contended that their Christian upbringing had little prepared them for a leadership role in the restoration. It seemed only yesterday that men of the cloth led their congregations. Now they were expected to be leaders of the newfound religious faith. Did the Lord not see their weakness in oratory skills and understanding of the nuances of the Bible? How could they rise beyond their natural ability to be messengers of God and share the good news with a world steeped in unbelief? Although many of their questions went unanswered, The newly ordained 70s left Kirtland to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Without purse or script, and often not knowing where to go or whom to speak with, the 70s began their missionary travels. Many were turned out of doors, abused, and frustrated. Others found listeners and a few grateful converts. To those who accepted the gospel and entered baptismal waters, Kirtland beckoned. Converts packed their belongings and headed to the central gathering place of the church. As for the 70s, they came and went as traveling missionaries that first season and the next. With an endowment of power, Joseph knew the 70s could magnify their ability to preach to a fallen world and reap a bountiful harvest. Now think about this. Obviously, compare this to ourselves as we're, awaiting the eventuality of the second coming and the influx that's coming. Joseph also knew that there was only one place on earth that this singular gift could be bestowed, the Kirtland Temple. Could 70s wait until the temple was finished? It appears not. In January 1836, 2 months shy of the temple's dedication, Joseph invited the 12 apostles and the presidents of the 70s to meet him in the unfinished temple. In that holy house, Joseph gave these leaders an endowment or anointing of power to enhance their ability to carry out their priesthood assignments. After each had received his anointing, Joseph instructed them to call upon God with uplifted hands to seal the promised blessings. It was then that 3 of the 70s witnessed holy manifestations. Sylvester Smith saw, quote, a pillar of fire rest down and abide upon the heads of the quorum as they stood in the midst of the 12. Roger Orton saw, quote, a mighty angel riding upon a horse of fire with a flaming sword in his hand, followed by 5 others, encircle the house and protect the saints, even the Lord's anointed, from the power of Satan and a host of evil spirits which were striving to disturb the saints. And Zebedee Coltrane saw the, quote, Savior extended before him as upon a cross, and a little after, crowned with glory upon his head above the brightness of the sun, end quote. These manifestations, a precursor to Pentecostal events that followed 2 months later at the temple dedication, were spiritual outpourings from God. When the manifestations ceased, the presidents of the 70s were instructed to anoint quorum members with the same power that they had received, so that they too could fulfill their important role in carrying the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. By so doing, Joseph Smith again rolled responsibility from himself to the presidency, giving them the administration of blessings in addition to the responsibilities of calling, ordaining, and overseeing the function of the quorum. So, it's happened before to people that were not very prepared. Hopefully you have been to the temple and you've received your anointings and your endowment and all that stuff, which should prepare you not only for now, but I would think into the millennium as you step into that, whatever the leadership role is that you'll step into. So let's go to the spreadsheet. And I've done this exercise before, but I've updated the numbers. So I've used Dodge City, Kansas as an example. If you go to the church's meeting house locator, you'll notice that there's 1 ward in Dodge City, Kansas. So what's going to happen there at the second coming? So what I did, using very, very rough estimates, is I took the total population of Dodge City, Kansas, 27,788. Let's say that only half remain after the second coming. That would bring them down to 13,894. And let's say that most, but not all of them, want to join the church. Say that is like 70%. That would be 9,725 people in Dodge City, Kansas, after the second coming that would want to join the church. So I've updated the numbers, and let's look at the ward numbers. What I had on there before was 300, and it was based on, I forget at this point, but I think it was based on an article I found about Spanish wards. But anyway, I was pretty close. So I don't know if this has changed, but now we know for sure 250 total members, 100 participating adults, and then 20 Melchizedek priesthood holders that are, full tithe payers and all that. So these are the numbers, okay? And what I did is I took these numbers for Dodge City, Kansas, and then did a ratio for these numbers: ward size, participating adults, and Melchizedek priesthood holders. So what you would end up in that scenario, what you would end up with in that scenario would be this. For every one of those 70% that want to join the church, it would be one person from the ward per 39 people. If we're talking about participating adults, then it would be one participating adult to 97 new converts from Dodge City. And for Melchizedek priesthood holders in the ward, the ratio would be one Melchizedek priesthood holder to 486 new converts. So that is a little bit of a dilemma, because that means that there's going to be a lot of baptisms, a lot of confirmations. There's going to be a lot of people wanting to go to the temple to get sealed. And obviously, now you go from, I should have done this. So how many wards all of a sudden would that be? So ward size 250. Okay, so 9,725 divided by 250. So all of a sudden in that area, that would be 40 new wards, going from 1 to 40. Okay. And, since there's only one ward in Kansas, in Dodge City, Kansas, all of a sudden you would have almost 5 stakes there. All of a sudden, almost 5. So there's going to be a need. There's going to be an intense need for people that already know the church, for people that have the priesthood. Because how do you get baptized? Oh, you need someone that's a priesthood holder. They have to at least be a priest. Priests in the Aaronic priesthood can baptize. So that helps out a little bit. But most everything else requires Melchizedek priesthood holder. Okay. So that's why I think that a lot of these changes may be actually gearing up for this eventuality. So for example, I'm not going to find it here. I'm not going to go through this whole thing again. But, no, here it is. It's right here. I just stopped on it. So, for example, when it comes to sealing and baptismal ordinances, now the witnesses don't have to be priesthood holders. They can be women, youth, and children. I mean, in the case of a sealing, that's in the temple, so it could be women. But for baptisms, women, youth, and children. It doesn't just have to be priesthood holders. And why might that be important? Well, it might be important because they might be baptizing all day long for a few weeks or something like that. Also, we've talked about, for example, there used to be the young men's presidencies, like the adults that were in the young men's presidencies. Well, that was dissolved. Oh, here it is. I stopped on it again. Ward young men presidencies discontinued. So now those men are freed up to be, for example, an elders quorum, when all of a sudden in elders quorum, you're outnumbered by all these new converts that have all these questions about the church. You can be there to help with the lessons, to answer questions, and so on and so forth. We went from 3-hour to 2-hour church. That's going to make it easier when you have a bunch of people all of a sudden being thrown into this new situation. And of course, all these things help right now before the second coming, but they're definitely going to help after the second coming too. And so you can go through this list. The name of this spreadsheet, I renamed it. It's under Timeline Preparing the Church for Second Coming. And I've done videos about this. We've gone over all these changes, and this is the most recent change. So there's going to be more stakes in the United States and Canada, which may help with the load. But these are the things to think about. Now, remember, with this, I should have done this. You know what? Let me do something really quick. Okay, I just realized something that I needed to add on here, so I stopped the video to do it. Okay, so before we go into this next scenario, which is actually going to be more realistic, let's look at this talk from President Oaks, at the time Elder Oaks, in the Quorum of the 12, his April 2004 General Conference talk called Preparation for the Second Coming. And he says, the arithmetic of this parable is chilling. The 10 virgins obviously represent members of Christ's church. For all were invited to the wedding feast, and all knew what was required to be admitted when the bridegroom came, but only half were ready when he came. Now, I've never really known, and I haven't been able to get to the bottom of this, and I promise you, you don't know either, unless you have a quote that clearly spells it out. What I don't know is if the half that aren't admitted into the wedding feast are these telestial people that are accounted among the wicked, because there are telestial people in the church. There are telestial people in the church. It does not matter if you are a bishop. It does not matter if you've gone on a mission. It does not matter if you have the priesthood. It does not matter if you're an apostle. Look at Judas. There are wheat and there are tares. So what I don't know is if this is referring to the tares of the church that are telestial, or if it simply means those that are worthy to participate in the events of, for example, being caught up to meet Christ in the cloud. Whereas maybe if you're living a terrestrial life, you're not telestial, but you're terrestrial, maybe you would miss out on that. But because you're terrestrial, you would still move into the millennium. So it's not clear to me. And please don't put anything in the comments unless you have something to back it up. Unless you have a specific quote. Okay? So I'm going to assume that he's referring to telestials. Let's just say that he's referring to telestials that will be counted among the wicked and will be removed from the earth at the second coming. So if that's the case, let's go back over here. That would make these ratios even worse, okay? Because you would go from, now these are just rough calculations. You would go from a ward of 250, okay? A ward of 250 to 125. And participating adults from 100 to 50. And Melchizedek priesthood holders from 20 to 10. And so now this is what the ratios would be to that 70% of Dodge City that remains that wants to join the church. For every one person in the church or in the ward, there would be 78 people, new converts. For every one participating adult, there would be 194 new converts. And for Melchizedek priesthood holders, for every one, there would be 973 new converts in this scenario. So that's like even worse. That's even more. That's an even larger load. So you can see, probably everybody is going to have to step up and become a leader in this new world of the millennium. So, all right, well, that's all that I have to share in this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.